Greetings again, do-it-yourselfers. So this weekend I have a 2000, I think it's a 2000, Toyota Sienna van, and this engine was, there's many different versions of this V6 engine that's in here, and the Highlanders, much later models, even up to 2008, I believe, at least. Lots and lots of Toyotas use a version of this engine or the same exact engine. So this is going to apply to a whole bunch of models of Toyota, which is one of the reasons that I'm doing a very rare replacement video on my channel. But also the main reason is I don't have any timing belt videos on my channel. And as usual, I don't want to show you how to do a timing belt on a 2000 Toyota Sienna, because then you will only know how to do a timing belt on a 2000 Toyota Sienna. What I want to do is show some general strategies for doing a timing belt so you understand what you're doing, what to look for. And the idea is after this video, you should be able to feel confident that you could do a timing belt on any car. When you get to a point where you understand what you're doing, you don't open up the car and see a bunch of spaghetti in there and wondering, oh my God, how do I get to the timing belt? That's the least of your things. You want to get to a level where you know you can get to the timing belt. It's just a matter of where are the timing marks on the crankshaft and on the camshaft sprockets. How do you set them correctly? And various little things like that. But it doesn't really become a matter of, oh no, how do I take the radiator out to get to the timing belt cover or something. If you're at that stage, you probably might not want to do a timing belt, especially on a car like this, because it's an interference engine. It is one of the things that I'll talk about. If you do not do this job correctly, you can absolutely destroy the engine. So very important to understand what you're doing, not just be able to follow step by step like a parts changer. So one of the first things we're going to do to make sure that we don't destroy this engine is this. General timing belt advice number one for all cars. You never just replace the timing belt. Get yourself one of these. This is a timing belt component kit. This contains basically every component that the timing belt touches. This one also includes a water pump because on this model the timing belt drives the water pump. It'll come with all the gaskets you need, pulleys, there's new idler pulleys here, a brand new tensioner. And the reason that you want to get a new kit is because, at least in my opinion, if you only replace the timing belt, you are actually more likely to experience a timing belt failure than if you didn't touch the thing at all in the first place. Why is that? Because you have to remember, this new timing belt is going to have a lot more tension on it than the stretched out 100,000 mile old, actually 109,000 mile old timing belt in this car, which is long past due. I believe this is a 90,000 recommendation on a timing belt. Some are as little as 60,000, but the point is, after 108,000 miles, all the components in that car are also 108,000 miles old and have not been under the tension of this new belt. When you put the new belt with more tension onto a pulley with 100 and something thousand miles on it, the chances that you're going to have that pulley fail or the idler fail or the bearings fail or something like that, the tensioner certainly is more likely to fail. Then what's going to happen is the timing belt won't break, but something else will, which is the same thing. And on an interference engine, which means that the pistons and the valves can come in contact with each other if the engine runs out of time, then you can actually, well, you almost certainly will destroy the engine if that happens. So always replace all the components that the timing belt touches. And this is one of those things where a lot of people don't understand this, so they go to a mechanic, they want to get their timing belt service done because that's what it says in their owner's manual. And the mechanic says, well, for a few $100 more, we replace the water pump and we replace this and we replace that and the idler and everything. Really recommend you do that. And people are like, see, those mechanics rip you off because I just need an $11 timing belt and they're trying to charge me hundreds of dollars for these parts. Believe me, I'm the first one to stand in line to start calling out professional mechanics that are ripping people off. I spend all weekend doing cleanup after such professional mechanics. Believe me, I know. But this is not one of those cases. This is a case where the mechanic is actually doing the right thing. He's preventing you from having a massive engine failure possibly, or certainly at the very minimum, a comeback when the timing belt fails. So they are not trying to rip you off in that case. As a matter of fact, if you find a mechanic that does not say to replace all the other components and he agrees to only replace the timing belt, that is the guy you need to stay away from. So let's go ahead and talk real quick about interference engines so you understand what your potential dangers are here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So real quick, you've heard of the fact that your timing belt breaks and it destroys the engine, and why is that, and how do you know you have an interference engine, and blah, blah, blah. So real quick, what an interference engine is, you've got your piston here, and then of course in the cylinder above the piston you've got your valves, and I've just got one valve here for example, and typically of course, you know, the valve opens and lets air in, closes, the piston comes up, compresses everything, boom, explosion, you get your crankshaft moving, and then of course the other valve opens, the exhaust valve, the piston comes up and pushes the exhaust out. So hopefully you're familiar with that concept. In an interference engine, the valve actually moves deep enough into the cylinder that it could be contacted by the piston. But of course, everything is timed right. If the piston is about to touch the valve is going to retract so that the piston never touches the valve. What happens in a timing belt failure in an interference engine is when the timing belt breaks, all of your valves freeze in time where they are. Some of those valves may be in a full open position, so they're rather deep into the cylinder. Now those valves freeze in time. Your piston, however, does not. It still keeps rolling along because it's engaged with your driveline. So when the piston comes up, it smacks the valve. At the best case scenario, you're going to bend the valve, which at the very minimum means you're going to need a valve job, replace the cylinder head, something like that. Your worst case scenario is it's going to punch a hole right through the crown of the piston. And I actually saw one where it actually just cracked the piston and a whole chunk of the piston just removed. So that's what an interference engine is. That is why, A, it is important to change your timing belt because you do not want it to break, but B, to make sure that you also change all the timing belt components so that after you put your new timing belt in, you do not increase the chance of a component failure and have this happen. And C, to make sure you do this job correct, because if you start the engine and you've got this thing out of time, you're going to constantly be banging the valve and the piston and destroying the engine as a result of your attempt to prevent this from happening in the first place. So how do you know if you have an interference engine? Well, one thing that you'll often hear, cars with timing chains are not interference, cars with timing belts are. That is not true. While I don't know of any cars with a timing chain that are interference engines, there may be, I don't know of any. I know for a fact there are many cars that have timing belts that are not interference engines. Your best way is there is a website, which I'll post in the description, where you can just enter your model and your year, and it will tell you if you have an interference engine or not. And then you can make a little more of an educated decision if you want to take this on, because if you're not comfortable with what you're doing after watching the video, my recommendation is don't do it, because if you start the car when it's out of time, if it's out of time enough, you will destroy the engine. And on this model, it's going to be very common with Toyotas, transverse mounted. Makes it a little bit more complicated because we've got the sidewall to deal with, but we'll get some tricks for handling that. And the other thing that makes this model particularly frustrating, I really hate models that do this, is the number one cylinder is under this intake manifold. The Dodge Avengers did that too, and there's a lot of other models that for some reason the engineers put number one under an intake manifold. So your options are, obviously we need to get to top dead center cylinder number one, on the compression stroke, and that's going to be complicated because we would have to remove the intake manifold. I am going to do this without actually physically finding the top dead center on that cylinder. We're going to use the timing marks to do that, so I will show you that. But on most models, or especially if you are not real comfortable with what you're doing here, you're not real sure where the timing marks are, you're going to want to go ahead and take the extra step to remove the intake manifold and make sure that you're at top dead center compression cylinder number 1. And obviously the first step, get the battery off here. And just wanted to say, I know I've got a number of professional mechanics on my channel. I appreciate all people who subscribe, but it's especially nice when you have some professional mechanics because they give extra good advice to do-it-yourselfers and everything, which we all appreciate. There's a couple things I was hoping from you guys. One of them to confirm my theory on the timing belt, that you should replace all the components for that. If professional mechanics substantiate that, then that would help to push that point home. The second thing is maybe some explanation on why there are interference engines. My belief, I have not looked this up, but my belief is it's because typically, because more economical cars are going to have smaller engines, by opening the valve deeper into the cylinder, it makes up for the fact that it's generally a smaller engine and therefore smaller valves. So by opening deeper into the cylinder, you can get away with smaller valves. It kind of helps with the economical nature. That is what I believe is most likely the explanation, but if anybody knows for sure why they make interference engines and I'm wrong about that, please do point that out. And on any transverse mounted engine, the easiest way to get through there is going to be through the wheel well. So you're going to want to take the wheel off, as well as any inner fender aprons or anything like that. Ha, my battery is still alive on this thing. And just saying, if I were this guy, maybe I'd be a little bit more worried about my tire condition than my timing belt condition. That's pretty bad. And there's a child seat in the back seat of the car too, so that's kind of concerning. I will have to mention and suggest he gets new tires. So while I go ahead and remove this inner splash shield here, one of the things that normally I would do is, of course, I would drain the coolant because we're going to replace the water pump and everything. But I wanted to go ahead and start right away with the crankshaft here because if you are a do-it-yourselfer and you're going to do this and you do not have an impact gun, and as a matter of fact, even if you do have an impact gun on some of the later models, this could change your plans for the weekend, the crankshaft bolt here. I don't think it's going to be an issue on this older model here, but I know about a few months ago I was doing a 2008 Highlander, and the crankshaft bolt on that was so incredibly tight that even my 3/4 inch impact would not remove it. And I had to resort to a method that I will tell you about. I'm not going to show you though, because it's kind of dangerous, but you may kind of have to invest in some special tools to get this thing off if you don't have like a really, really powerful impact gun. And even then, the old method of maybe threading in a couple of bolts and then using something to wedge it in place while you undo the crankshaft bolt. On that Highlander model, I tried doing that and I actually ended up bending a tire iron in the process. So we're going to go ahead and address this first and see how well this goes. But I wanted to make a couple comments on how you can remove this crankshaft if you do not have an impact gun. All right, this guy here is a 22 millimeter, by the way. 22 millimeter, that alone may send you to the parts store. All right, that's kind of what I was afraid of. That is not going to come off with my air gun, so I'm going to move real quick to a plan B here. Say hello to my little friend. Now, if this doesn't do it, then this video is going to get really exciting. All right. Well, Sorry, but I will tell you, if you don't have a monster thing like that, how to get yourself out of that jam. Although, do so at your own risk. All right, so now I can go ahead and drain my coolant. Again, that's the reason why I didn't recommend to drain the coolant first, which would have been the first step. It's because if you can't get this crankshaft off, then you don't have to deal with refilling the coolant. But if you are intent on getting this crankshaft off, despite not having a monster impact gun like that, well, here's a couple of tricks to do it. First of all, some things not to do. And as usual, you never go to the chat rooms where a whole bunch of idiots always give you some stupid advice. The best one that I saw was a guy who said, bring the spark plug out of one of the cylinders and then put a screwdriver in there. And then when you turn backwards on the crankshaft and bring the piston up, it will jam against the screwdriver. That will lock the crankshaft so that you can remove the bolt. That has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I don't even know if the guy was serious, but he's seriously an idiot just for even putting that out there. Don't do stupid stuff like that. Another way to do that, though, that I actually find acceptable is to remove the spark plug and feed some rope into the spark plug hole and just fill the cylinder with rope. Now, you want to be very careful when you do this. So what I would recommend if you're going to use that trick, which I think is going to be perfectly fine, you have to make sure you're inserting that rope on the power stroke of that cylinder. The power stroke is going to be on the downward stroke after top dead center compression. You want to make absolutely sure you were not on top dead center exhaust, because you will bend that exhaust valve. So what you would do is come to top dead center compression stroke, keep going down a little bit, fill up with rope, and then when you crank backwards on your crankshaft, that piston's going to come back up, jam up against the rope, but now you've got the whole rod supporting locking the piston, and I really don't think you're going to break a piston rod doing it. I would not have any issue doing that method, but in general, I really, I feel it's a little bit uncomfortable. I don't like doing methods that, if they fail, you end up destroying the engine. In general, probably good practice. Another method that a lot of people do, and as a matter of fact, you'll see it in a lot of the books and technical manuals and stuff, although I don't really agree with it, I've never tried it, is to take a screwdriver and jam a couple of teeth in the flywheel or drive plate to jam the engine up. And the problem that I have with that, again, is I am more inclined to think you're going to break a tooth off that flywheel than to break loose that nut. That's what I think. Maybe wrong about that, but I certainly don't want to be right about that, break off a tooth, and now I've got to remove the engine to replace a drive plate. So maybe not one of my favorite ways. But ultimately, there's two other ways to do this and guaranteed get this done. One method is to do it the right way, and that is to get a special spanner wrench tool for this particular crankshaft that is going to lock the crankshaft in place while you go ahead and use a breaker bar and remove that nut. I actually own a couple of those tools, but not one for this particular model, so you need different spanner wrenches for some different models. But that is a way to do it. One way that's going to occur to you to do it is to make your own spanner wrench. If you do, it's going to have to be very, very, very well made, because there's going to be so much torque. If you make it out of like a couple of, 8mm bolts or something, and you make a little fork out of that, and you put your 8mm bolts into these holes in the crankshaft to try to hold it in place, you're probably just going to twist those things up as if they were safety pins or something. So but anyway, that's the right way to do it, is to use the right tool. The other way that's guaranteed to work is kind of a dangerous method, but it does work. And that is to take a breaker bar and to go ahead and position on the bolt with your socket and lock the breaker bar against some component of the frame, such that if the crankshaft were to move in the usual direction of travel, which would be clockwise, that it would jam up against your breaker bar. And the idea is to then go in the car and just bump the starter, just turn it on just for a tenth of a second and turn it immediately off. And what that's going to do is the starter is going to have way more than enough torque to go ahead and break that bolt loose. But It goes without saying, you have to make sure that you are safe in doing that. You don't want anybody else in the garage. You want to make sure that you don't have your breaker bar positioned in the wrong direction so that it goes with the starter and flings up into the wheel well. You want to make sure you are not using any extensions, a deep well socket, anything like that. You want to be right up at the hub. Do not use anything other than a breaker bar. Do not use a ratchet. Do not use anything less than 1/2 inch. This is a really dangerous thing to do, and even if it's not dangerous, it potentially could cause some serious destruction. Something is going to move with this method, and if it's not that bolt, it's going to be something else, and it's probably going to move permanently. So just make sure that if you do the method, I'm not going to show it. I'm kind of a little hesitant about even including this, but if you are hell-bent on doing this job this weekend, then that is ultimately a way that a lot of do-it-yourselfers resort to. I am not condoning it. I am just here to provide information. But now that we've got this thing broken loose and we've got our coolant drained and everything, let's move on to the next step. So our next step now is we're going to go ahead and remove the serpentine belt here, and we want to get this engine mount out of the way. Remember to support the engine with the jack before you do that. Hopefully you know how to do all these things. If you need help removing a serpentine belt, this is really not going to be the project for you. By the way, I do have to I can't stand these engineers that they put the hood prop right in the way of the business end of the engine. Why couldn't they have put this over on the other side of the engine where you're much less likely to be doing any work? I may actually go ahead and just remove the hood on this vehicle just to make it easier. But anyway, we're going to get everything out of the way here and go ahead and remove the timing covers. And that is going to be the way that we're going to bring this engine to top dead center, since cylinder number 1 is really hidden and covered up. So when I get to that point, I will be back. All right, while I get some of this out, I did want to take just a real brief opportunity here to make a little mention here. By the time this thing gets onto YouTube, I will already have almost 3,000 subscribers, which I am actually really excited about. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who subscribes. And also I wanted to thank especially the people that were here from the very beginning, back when I had that piece of crap camera and no audio and all that. So those are guys like Dave, who is a retired physician. He has a channel, Spelunkered. I'll put it in the description. He is a do-it-yourselfer like me, does a lot of auto stuff, but basically Dave will fix anything and will make like a special tool with a welder or something in order to get around some kind of problem or issue. Dave would have been real interesting to see how he would get that crankshaft socket off, for example. He's kind of a MacGyver sort of, but he's got a really good channel. Again, that's Spelunkered. Really good do-it-yourself auto repair channel. He has the same thought process that I do. He's very scientific, analytical in his diagnosis and troubleshooting. He is not a parts changer. Terry, who goes by Stuzzman52, excellent teaching channel on auto repair stuff as well, particularly with electrical. He is a retired electrical engineer. It's kind of fun to know your people that are watching your videos. He is an excellent resource if you want to learn about electrical, and his wiring diagram series on his channel is really, in my opinion, one of the best wiring diagram tutorials that I've ever seen. And I really recommend, if you are interested in learning wiring diagrams, and if you're like me and electrical is maybe your weakest point, then you definitely want to check out his channel, because he will definitely get you on the right track. And then also all the other early guys, 12VGS, FreeSafe, those guys who used to make fun of my early videos, which were poor quality and all that. Well, actually, thanks to those guys, this is the reason why you have this high quality programming now, is because all of those guys that I mentioned also encouraged me to try to invest more in the channel and grow it more, because they thought that it actually had some potential. And initially I just did this channel just to help advertise my little weekend auto repair gig I've got going in my house, but it turns out they were absolutely right. And then also a really huge thanks to a more recent subscriber, Jeffrey Wilson. He's a professional mechanic, actually, out of Canada, but he always, every video that I do, he's always sharing the video with people, gets a bunch of new subscribers for me and everything, always giving me some advice on things. So, and again, his professional mechanic advice itself in the comments is well worth reading. So I just wanted to say thanks to all the people that have subscribed and continue to support the channel and everything. And I'm very, very grateful for it. So this is actually getting to be kind of fun now watching this thing grow. And just one free little tip here that I will show you that I like to do, and that is on these models where you have the alternator that adjusts the tension on the accessory belt here. So you got the little clamp bolt here and then the adjusting bolt here. What I like to do is put a little bit of paint on the thread for the adjusting bolt so that when I put this back together, I can get the tension immediately right back into the ballpark. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and proactively answer my emails because I know I'm going to get a bunch of emails from people on how do you remove the inner belt, where's the tensioner for the inner belt. The power steering pump is your tensioner for the inner belt. If you look right where the light is flashing there, you see there is an adjustable bracket. So if you loosen your power steering pump, loosen the bolt on that adjustable bracket, you'll be able to move the power steering pump out of the way to loosen the belt. Seems I always get emails on that because I don't show the bolt by bolt, but I honestly got to tell you, if you can't look at that and figure out that that must be the tensioner, I'm going to suggest you not do this job. That's just me though, sorry if that sounds bitter. I need to do one more bit of preventive maintenance. I already know what's coming. I'm going to get emails from people asking, how do you know how to reset the tension on the second drive belt using the power steering pump? And what did I just say in the previous scene? There. That is how I'm going to know, by lining up those paint marks. It's amazing some of the questions I get. I actually got a question just today from somebody asking on a video how I reached one of the spark plugs in an engine because the alternator is right in the way. I removed the alternator. All right, let's get moving. All right, and by the way, quick reminder here, don't forget to check these belts here. Let's take a look at. All right, I don't know how well this is going to show up in the camera. I recall doing a video on belt squeal a while ago, but that was before I had high definition camera and all that. But we can look at this belt, and this is kind of what I was hoping to show in the previous. There's a whole bunch of cracks that are sort of going across all the ribs. A crack here and there along the ribs is okay, but if you bend the belt back, we can see there's cracks all across all four ribs like a straight line. So this belt needs to be replaced. It means, of course, the other belt is certainly going to need to be replaced since it's the same age. So don't forget to do stuff like this. The last thing you want to do is have a comeback because of a broken accessory belt after you do this big job and everything, and the customer gets all mad at you. All right, admittedly, I did not see this coming. That I recall, all of these harmonic balancers are not pressed on. They should be just slip on, but this one is not budging in the slightest. So, but I'm quite sure that they're not pressed on, but you may want to be prepared and have a puller on hand. So what I'm going to do is just very gently see if I can find a place to pry against. I am not going to pry hard on this. If this doesn't give with just a couple of little light taps like that, see if I can walk it off. And I'm prying up against this bolt behind it, and it doesn't seem like it's being very cooperative here. So I doubt that you're going to run into this problem, but I'm going to go ahead and play it safe and go ahead and get a puller. Let's see if that did anything. Nope, not a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get a puller and get that thing off.